The shuttle docked at the Valdres Ascendancy Institute with a soft hum. Through the windows, the dying star burned red and orange, casting strange shadows across the crystalline towers of the most famous academy in the known galaxy. Students from 1,000 different worlds came here to learn, to grow, and to become the leaders of tomorrow. Maya Chun pressed her face against the window and watched the station grow larger. She was 17 years old. She was human, and she was about to become the first of her kind to study at an institute that had existed for 12,000 years. The other students on the shuttle did not look at her. Why would they? The Krethkai students stood nearly 3 meters tall, their blue skin glowing with bioluminescent patterns that showed their emotions. The Shivari clicked and buzzed to each other, their insect-like bodies covered in hard shells that could survive the vacuum of space. The LOI moved with quiet grace, their ancient eyes holding memories passed down through 300 years of ancestors. And then there was Maya, small, soft, fragile, a member of a species that had only discovered faster than light. Travel 50 years ago, she carried a single bag over her shoulder. Everything she owned fit inside it. The shuttle doors opened, and the students walked into the grand entrance hall. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Holographic displays showed the faces of famous graduate scientists who had cured plagues, diplomats who had ended wars, leaders who had shaped the destiny of entire star systems. No human faces appeared on those walls. A Proshet, tall Krethkai student walked past Maya, and the wind from his movement almost knocked her down. He did not notice. She was simply too small to see. First-year students will proceed to the orientation chamber, announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Please follow the illuminated path. Maya followed the glowing lines on the floor. Around her, students formed groups based on their species. The Krethkai walked together, their bioluminescent crests flashing in complex patterns as they communicated. The Shivari clustered in tight formations, their antennae touching as they shared thoughts through chemical signals. The LOI drifted in pairs, speaking in whispers that carried the weight of centuries. Maya walked alone. The orientation chamber was a massive amphitheater filled with floating seats that adjusted to fit each species. Maya found a seat designed for smaller beings, probably meant for the Telvari, a species of fox-like creatures known for their scientific achievements. The seat was still too big for her, but she made it work. A hologram appeared at the center of the chamber. It showed an elderly figure of a species Maya did not recognize, something like a tree that had learned to walk, with bark-like skin and branches that might have been arms. Welcome to the Valdres Ascendancy Institute, the hologram said. You represent the finest minds of your respective species. You have been chosen because you show potential that exceeds ordinary limits. Here, you will be tested. Many of you will fail. This is expected and acceptable. Those who remain will go on to shape the future of our galaxy. The hologram flickered and showed statistics. Graduation rates by species. The Krethkai graduated at 94%. The LOI at 97%. The Shivari at 88%. Humans were listed at the bottom of the display. Graduation rate, 0%. Sample size, 0 students. Maya was the first. There was no data because no human had ever attended. But next to the human entry, someone had added a note. Limited cognitive architecture presents significant challenges. Psychological support recommended. A few students glanced at Maya, some with pity, some with amusement. One Krethkai, a young male with particularly bright bioluminescent patterns, looked at her with something like curiosity. Then he looked away. After the orientation, Maya received her room assignment. She was placed in the 7th wing, the oldest part of the student dormitories. The hallways were narrower here, the lighting dimmer, the walls showing cracks that had been repaired many times over thousands of years. Her room was small. A bed that was slightly too long for her. A desk made of some kind of metal she did not recognize. A window that looked out at the dying star. She sat on the bed and allowed herself 1 minute of doubt. Just 60 seconds to feel small and scared and completely alone. Then the minute ended. She opened her bag and began to unpack. A knock came at her door. She opened it to find a Telvari standing in the hallway, an older one, with gray fur around his muzzle and tired eyes that had seen too many students come and go. "I am Professor Oris 7, he said. "I have been assigned as your mentor." The way he said, "assigned," told Maya everything she needed to know. He had not volunteered. Someone had given him this job because no one else wanted it. "Thank you for taking the time," Maya said. Oris 7 blinked. "You are polite. That is good. Politeness will make your failure more bearable for everyone involved." He paused. "That was not meant to be cruel. It is simply statistical reality. I am told humans appreciate honesty." "We do," Maya said. "And I appreciate you being direct. It saves time." Something flickered in the old professor's eyes. Interest, perhaps. Or maybe just surprise. "Your first classes begin tomorrow," he said. "Quantum navigation, diplomatic theory, and strategic thinking. Do you have any questions?" "Just one," Maya said. "The Krethkai student with the brightest crest, the one who looked at me during orientation. Who is he?" "That would be Veilrose," Oris 7 said. "He is considered the most gifted student to enroll in 300 years. He has already published papers on dimensional folding that senior researchers struggle to understand." "Why do you ask?" Maya smiled. It was a strange expression. The Telvari had no equivalent gesture. But something about it made Oris 7's fur stand up slightly. "No reason," she said. "I just like to know who I am working with." That night, the Institute held a welcome banquet in the Great Hall. Students sat at tables organized by species, eating foods designed for their specific biologies. Maya sat at a small table in the corner, eating a simple meal of rice and vegetables that the kitchen had struggled to prepare. Human food was not commonly requested. A group of Shivari students passed her table. One of them paused and made a clicking sound that Maya's translator rendered as, "Look at the soft one. How long before she breaks?" The others clicked in amusement. Maya looked up. She made direct eye contact with the Shivari who had spoken, and she smiled. The Shivari had no concept of smiling. They could not read the expression. But something in Maya's eyes, something calm and patient and absolutely unafraid, made the insectoid's wings flutter with sudden uncertainty. The Shivari turned away and hurried to join its companions. Maya returned to her meal. She had a long journey ahead of her. But she had survived long journeys before. Her species had been surviving them for a very long time. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The first month at the Valdris Institute was hard. Maya had expected this. She had prepared for it. But preparation and reality were different things. Quantum navigation required students to calculate pathways through folded space using mathematical systems that humanity had only discovered 30 years ago. The LOI students had inherited memories of these calculations from their ancestors. The Krethkai had brains with 4 separate processing centers that could work on different parts of a problem at the same time. The Shivari could connect their minds together and solve equations as a group. Maya had one brain, one set of memories, one lifetime of learning. She failed her first exam. The score was not just low, it was the lowest in the class by a significant margin. When the results were posted, a few students looked at her with expressions that said, "We expected this." Professor RS7 called her to his office that evening. "You understand what this means," he said. It was not a question. It means I need to study harder, Maya said. The old Telvari shook his head. It means you are competing against students whose species have had 10,000 years to develop minds suited for this work. You cannot study your way past biology. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, how long do Telvari live? 400 standard years on average. And Krefkai? 12,000 years. Sometimes longer. Humans live about 80 years, Maya said. Sometimes less. We have known about other species for only 50 years. We have been thinking about space travel for only a few hundred years. Everything your species learned over thousands of years, we are trying to learn in a single lifetime. She paused. So yes, I failed one exam. But I am not going to stop. RS7 studied her for a long moment. You are stubborn. My species was almost destroyed by ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters more times than I can count, Maya said. We are still here. Stubborn is how we survived. She returned to her room and studied until the artificial dawn began to glow through her window. Then she went to class. 2 weeks later, something strange happened. The strategic thinking course presented students with a complex simulation. A war scenario involving 12 different factions, hundreds of variables, and thousands of possible outcomes. Students were expected to find the optimal solution within 3 standard days. Maya submitted her answer in 6 hours. It was not the optimal solution. Her answer did not achieve the highest possible score. But when Professor Telncast reviewed her work, she called Maya to stay after class. Explain your methodology, the professor said. Telncast was an LOI, ancient and patient, with eyes that held 3 centuries of inherited memory. Maya explained. She had not tried to calculate every variable. Instead, she had looked for patterns, connections that were not obvious, relationships between factions that the simulation's designers had not intended to be important. You found a solution that our models did not predict, Telncast said slowly. The simulation has been used for 800 years. No one has ever approached it this way. Was I wrong to do it differently? No, the professor said. You were creative. That is not a quality we typically test for. She paused. What do you call this approach? Lateral thinking, Maya said. Looking at problems from unexpected angles. Finding solutions that do not follow straight lines. Telncast tried to find a translation for this concept in her own language. She could not. Word spread quietly through the faculty. The human student was doing something unusual. Then came the endurance tests. Every student at the institute underwent physical and psychological stress evaluations. These tests measured how each species responded to extreme conditions. The Krefkai could survive in hard vacuum for several minutes, their bodies naturally sealing to prevent damage. The LOI could enter deep sleep states that let them survive almost any physical trauma. The Shivari had exoskeletons that could withstand incredible pressure. Humans had none of these abilities. Maya's body was soft. Her skin was fragile. She needed air, water, and stable temperatures to survive. But when the results came back, the medical staff was confused. They tested Maya's pain tolerance. It was not the highest, but she did not stop when the pain became intense. She simply continued. The test had to be stopped manually because she showed no sign of stopping herself. They tested her sleep deprivation tolerance. Most species became non-functional after a certain number of hours without rest. Maya remained functional far longer than expected, not because her body was stronger, but because her mind refused to quit. They tested her psychological resistance to stress. They found that humans had a remarkable ability to adapt to horrible situations. They could normalize almost anything. They could function under pressure that would break other species. The medical staff requested a second round of tests. Then a third. There must be an error, one doctor said. There is no error, another replied. Humans evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill them. Predators, diseases, disasters, and climate changes. They survived not by being the strongest or fastest, but by simply refusing to die. Maya was not aware of these conversations. She was too busy studying. One evening, Valrose approached her in the library. The Krefkai prodigy was even more impressive up. Close, his bioluminescent crest pulsed with complex patterns that indicated deep thought. You defeated me in the applied engineering challenge yesterday, he said. Maya looked up from her reading. I did not defeat you. I simply found a different solution. A solution that worked better than mine, Valrose said. My approach was technically correct. Yours was something else. I have been thinking about it for 2 days. I do not understand how you arrived at your answer. I broke the machine and fixed it differently, Maya said, but the simulation did not require the machine to be broken. No, but breaking it showed me how it actually worked. Then I could rebuild it better. Valrose sat down across from her. I have studied engineering for 300 years. I have never considered breaking something to understand it. How would you learn how something works? By studying its design, by understanding its principles, by learning from those who came before. Maya nodded. Humans do that too. But sometimes we also just take things apart to see what happens. We call it experimenting. Is that not dangerous? Sometimes. We have lost many people to experiments, but we have also learned things that we could not have learned any other way. Valrose was quiet for a long moment. His crest flickered with colors that Maya could not interpret. You are very strange, he finally said. Thank you, Maya replied. Late that night, Maya went to the Institute's archives. The ancient halls were quiet and dark, filled with records that stretched back thousands of years. She found a terminal and began searching. She searched for information about the Orthani Empire, a civilization that had dominated the galaxy 3,000 years ago before suddenly collapsing. The archives contained 800 years of records about their fall. Maya read through all of them in a single sitting. An archivist found her there in the early morning hours. Still reading. You have been here all night, the archivist said. What draws you to such ancient history? Maya looked up. Her eyes were tired, but her mind was sharp. I want to understand how something so powerful could fail, she said. Because understanding failure is how my species learned to survive. The archivist watched her return to her reading. He made a note in his personal log. The human student had consumed more historical data in one night than most students. Reviewed in a semester. He was not sure what this meant, but he suspected that someone should probably be paying more attention to Maya-chan. By the middle of her second semester, Maya-chan had become something the Institute did not know how to classify. She was not the smartest student. The tests proved this clearly. She was not the fastest learner. The Shivari hive minds could absorb information at speeds no individual could match. She was not the most knowledgeable. The Ilwai carried centuries of inherited memory that Maya could never match. But something about her made the faculty uncomfortable. It started with a guest lecture. A famous scholar named Torvax Prime had come to speak about the integration of lesser species into galactic society. He was an expert in the field, having studied how young civilizations adapted to contact with more advanced ones. The key challenge, Torvax Prime explained to the assembled students, is helping primitive species understand their limitations. They must learn to accept support from more developed civilizations. They must understand that their role is to follow, not to lead. He brought up statistics. Graphs showing how young species typically required thousands of years of guidance before they could contribute meaningfully to galactic society. We must be patient with them, he said. They cannot help being what they are. Maya raised her hand. Torvax Prime looked at her with polite confusion. Most students did not interrupt famous scholars. Yes? The human student? I have a question about your data, Maya said. You show that young species require long periods of guidance, but your data only includes species that accepted guidance. Do you have information about species that did not? The scholar frowned. Why would any species refuse guidance from more advanced civilizations? Humans almost did, Maya said. When we first made contact, there was significant debate about whether to accept help. Many of my people believed we should develop on our own, even if it took longer. That seems inefficient. Perhaps, but it is how we developed in the first place. Maya stood up. Her voice was calm and clear. My species evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill us. Ice ages froze our ancestors. Plagues killed millions. Predators hunted us. Natural disasters destroyed our cities again and again. We had no advanced species to guide us. We had no inherited memories. We had only ourselves. The lecture hall was very quiet. We survived by adapting, Maya continued. By trying things that did not make sense. By failing and failing and failing until something finally worked. We learned that survival is not about being the strongest or the smartest. It is about refusing to stop. Torvax Prime's scales had changed color, a sign of agitation in his species. That is a very aggressive perspective. It is not aggression, Maya said. It is simply how my species learned to exist. We do not expect catastrophe. We prepare for it. We do not hope things will work out. We make them work. She paused. With respect, your data may be incomplete. Perhaps the reason young species seem to require guidance is because you have only studied species who accepted it. She sat down. The lecture hall remained silent for several long seconds. Later that day, Professor Aura 7 found Maya in the gardens. The old Telvari sat beside her on a bench overlooking the dying star. You challenged a famous scholar in front of 300 students, he said. I asked a question. Maya replied, You made him look foolish. I pointed out a gap in his research. If his ideas cannot survive a simple question, perhaps they were not very strong ideas. RS7 made a sound that might have been laughter. You really are very strange. You keep saying that. I'm not sure it is a compliment. Neither am I. The following week, Maya was assigned to a group project. Teams of students from different species were meant to work together on a research problem. Maya's team included a Krethkai mathematician, 2 Shivari engineers, and an LOI historian. None of them wanted to work with a human. For the first 3 days, Maya was largely ignored. The Krethkai made calculations while the Shivari built models, while the LOI provided historical context. Maya sat in meetings and listened and watched. On the 4th day, the project hit a wall. The team could not find a solution that satisfied all the requirements. The Krethkai had calculated every possible approach. The Shivari had modeled every design. The LOI had researched every precedent. Nothing worked. Maya finally spoke up. What if we combine the 3rd design with the 7th calculation, but remove the historical constraints? The team stared at her. That makes no sense, the Krethkai said. The 3rd design was rejected because it conflicts with the 7th calculation. Only if you follow the standard approach, Maya said. But if you modify the initial parameters, you cannot just modify initial parameters. They are fixed. Why? Because that is how it has always been done. Maya smiled. On Earth, we have a saying. That is how it has always been done are the most dangerous words in any language. She explained her idea. It took nearly an hour because she had to translate concepts that did not exist in any of their languages. The team argued with her. They pointed out flaws. She acknowledged the flaws and suggested ways to work around them. By the end of the day, they had a solution. It was not perfect. It was not elegant, but it worked. The Krethkai mathematician looked at Maya with new eyes. How did you see that possibility? I calculated every option. You calculated every option within the existing framework, Maya said. I looked outside the framework, but that is not logical. No, it is creative. Humans learned to be creative because we did not have time to calculate everything. Our lives are too short. The mathematician considered this. My species lives 12,000 years. We have time to be thorough. And my species lives 80 years. We have time to be desperate. Behind closed doors, the faculty held another meeting about Maya Chandot. The dean presented her complete academic record. Her grades had improved dramatically since the first semester. Not because she had become smarter, but because she had learned how to learn in ways that suited her human brain. Look at this trajectory, the dean said. Her rate of improvement is unlike anything in our records. Most species plateau after initial adaptation. Humans apparently do not plateau. They just keep improving. Should we be concerned? Asked Professor Telmcast. Concerned about what? Humanity is 50 years in the spaceflight. This is one student from one small planet. What happens when they have had space travel for 1,000 years? For 10,000 years? The room was silent. I do not know, the dean finally said. And I think that uncertainty is what concerns me most. That night, Maya studied until her eyes burned. She slept for 4 hours. Then she woke up and studied more. She was not the smartest student at the Valdres Institute, but she was beginning to understand that intelligence was not the only thing that mattered. Sometimes, being too stubborn to fail was enough. The alarm began screaming at 3 in the morning. Maya woke instantly, a survival reflex that humans had, developed over millions of years of sleeping in dangerous places. She was on her feet and moving before she fully understood what was happening. Red lights flashed in the corridor. Students stumbled out of their rooms, confused and afraid. The alarm was not like the regular emergency drills. This sound was different, deeper, more urgent. All students report to evacuation zones, announced the Institute's emergency system. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Maya ran toward the main corridor, where crowds of students were moving in controlled chaos. She spotted Veilrose in the crowd, his bioluminescent crest flickering with color she had learned to recognize as fear. What is happening? She asked. The dead star, Veilrose said. Something has awakened inside it. They reached a viewing platform just as the truth became visible. The dying star that the Institute orbited had always been stable, slowly fading, but predictable. Now something was rising from its surface. A massive structure, ancient and terrible, emerging from the stellar fire like a monster from a nightmare. Orthani, whispered an LOI student nearby. That is Orthani technology. The Orthani Empire had collapsed 3,000 years ago. But apparently, they had left something behind. The structure continued to rise. It was a weapon. Maya could see that clearly. A massive cannon pointed directly at the Institute station. And it was charging. Within minutes, the Institute's leadership had assembled in the emergency command center. Maya was not supposed to be there, but she followed Veilrose, and no one stopped her. Everyone was too frightened to care about rules. The dean stood at the center of the room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the weapon's status. His tree-like body seemed to have aged decades in minutes. Analysis? He asked. A Krethkai scientist stepped forward. The weapon will reach full charge in approximately 90 minutes. When it fires, the energy output will be sufficient to destroy the entire station. There will be no survivors. Evacuation? Impossible. Our fastest shuttles cannot clear the blast radius in 90 minutes. The weapon's targeting system will track any vessels that launch. Countermeasures? We have none capable of affecting a weapon of this magnitude. The Dean closed his eyes. Then we need solutions. All of you are the finest minds in the galaxy. Think. The LOI entered memory trances, searching through centuries of inherited knowledge for anything relevant. The Krethkai linked their processing centers together, running millions of simulations per second. The Shivari formed hive mind clusters, trying to reach consensus on survival strategies. Minutes passed. The weapon continued to charge. Maya watched the displays carefully. She studied the weapon's structure. She read the analysis reports as they appeared. And slowly, an idea began to form. It was a terrible idea. But it was the only one she had. She approached Professor Oris 7. I need to speak to the Dean. This is not the time, Maya. I have a plan. The old Telvari looked at her. He saw something in her eyes that made him pause. What kind of plan? A human kind of plan. 5 minutes later, Maya stood before the assembled leadership of the Institute. Valorous stood beside her, along with a Shivari engineer named Chitters in Darkness and Professor Oris 7 himself. The weapon has a control center, Maya said, pointing to the holographic display. Here, near the base of the structure. If we can reach it, we might be able to shut down the charging sequence. Reach it how? The Dean asked. The weapon is inside a star. There are maintenance tunnels. Old Orthani design. They are shielded against the heat, at least partially. A small team could enter through here. She pointed, navigate through the structure, and reach the control center. The radiation levels inside those tunnels would be lethal within minutes. Yes, for most species. The room went quiet. Humans have a higher tolerance for radiation than many species, Maya continued. Not by much, but enough. I could survive long enough to reach the control center. Could you survive long enough to return? Maya did not answer that question. She did not need to. This is suicide, said the Krethkai scientist. The weapon fires in 78 minutes, Maya replied. Do you have a better option? No one spoke. Valeros stepped forward. I will go with her. My species can survive vacuum and extreme temperatures. I can help. As will I, said Chitters in Darkness. My exoskeleton provides radiation resistance. And I know Orthani Engineering my hive studied their technology for centuries. Professor Oris 7 looked at Maya for a long moment. Then he sighed. Someone needs to guide you through the historical records of Orthani control systems. I suppose I am the only one here who has studied them recently. Maya stared at him. You will die. I am 400 years old. I have lived a good life, and I am tired of waiting to see if you will fail. His fur bristled slightly. I would rather know. The Dean authorized the mission. There was no other choice. 20 minutes later, Maya and her team were in a shuttle, flying toward the rising weapon. The heat increased as they approached. The radiation warnings began flashing almost immediately. We have approximately 40 minutes once we enter the tunnels, Chitters in Darkness said. After that, the radiation will begin causing permanent damage, even to our more resistant biologies. Then we move fast, Maya said. They entered through a maintenance hatch that had not been opened in 3,000 years. The tunnels inside were dark and hot and filled with the ghosts of a dead empire. Orthani symbols covered the walls, warnings and directions in a language that had not been spoken in millennia, or 7 translated as they moved. Left here. Straight for 200 meters. Down this shaft. The radiation increased with every step. Maya felt it in her bones, a burning sensation that her body recognized as damage. Even if her mind refused to acknowledge it, they reached a sealed door. Chitters in Darkness worked on it with specialized tools, while Velros watched for dangers. Maya checked their time. 30-2 minutes until the weapon fired. The door opened. Beyond it lay a chamber filled with alien machinery, still functional after 3,000 years. The control interface should be here somewhere, Aura-7 said, scanning the room. Look for an automated defense system activated. Energy bolts filled the air. Velros threw himself in front of Maya, absorbing a blast that would have killed her. He collapsed, his bioluminescent crest flickering weakly. "Go," he gasped. "I will survive. Go." Maya ran. Chitters in Darkness followed, firing at the defense systems, while Aura-7 searched for the control interface. "There!" the professor shouted, pointing at a console covered in ancient symbols. Maya reached it. Her hands were shaking from fear, from radiation, from exhaustion. She did not care. "What do I do?" "I do not know." The Orthani designed their systems to be intuitive. "You must feel your way through." "That is not helpful. It is all I have." Maya placed her hands on the console. Strange energy flowed through her. The Orthani technology seemed to respond to her touch, reading her intentions. Trying to understand this strange creature that had invaded its systems. 20-4 minutes until the weapon fired. Maya closed her eyes. She stopped thinking. She let her instincts take over, the same instincts that had kept her ancestors alive. Through ice ages and plagues and disasters. She pressed a symbol. Then another. Then another. "What are you doing?" Chitters in Darkness asked. "I have no idea," Maya admitted. "But it feels right." 18 minutes until the weapon fired. Alarms began sounding throughout the structure. The machinery around them started to change, systems shutting down, power rerouting, the charging sequence interrupting itself. "It is working," Aura-7 said, his voice filled with wonder. "You are actually doing it." Maya did not respond. She was too focused on the task. 12 minutes, 8 minutes, 4 minutes. The weapon's charge dropped to 0. The massive cannon went dark. The structure began to sink back into the dying star from which it had risen. Maya collapsed against the console. Her body was burning from radiation. Her hands were blistered. Her vision was blurring, but she was smiling. "We need to leave," Chitters in Darkness said urgently. Now, they grabbed Maya and ran. Velros had recovered enough to move, supporting himself against the walls. Aura-7 led the way back through the tunnels, moving faster than Maya had ever seen the old Talvari move. They reached the shuttle with minutes to spare. As they flew away from the sinking weapon, Maya looked back at the dying star. "Maya," Velros said quietly, "how did you know what to do?" She thought about the question. "I did not know. I guessed." "You guessed?" "Humans do that sometimes. When we do not have enough information to make a good decision, we make a decision anyway. Sometimes we are wrong. Sometimes we are right." She paused. "This time, we were right." The shuttle docked with the Institute station. Medical teams were waiting. They rushed Maya to the medical bay, already preparing treatments for radiation exposure. As they carried her through the corridors, students and faculty lined the walls. They watched in silence as the human girl who was supposed to fail was carried past like a hero. Chitters in Darkness walked beside the medical team. A young Shivari student asked him, "What are humans?" The engineer considered the question for a long moment. Then he clicked his mandibles in what might have been respect. 3 months passed after the Valdris incident. That was what the galaxy called it now, the Valdris incident. The day an ancient weapon nearly destroyed the most famous academy in known space, and a human girl stopped it. Maya Chun had healed. The radiation damage had been severe, but human bodies were remarkably good at repairing themselves. The medical staff had been surprised by how quickly she recovered. They should not have been surprised anymore. But they still were. The Institute had changed in ways that no one had expected. Professor Telmcast introduced a new elective course called Death World Adaptation Psychology. It studied how species that evolved under harsh conditions developed unique cognitive and emotional traits. The first case study was humanity. The course filled up within hours of registration opening. The concept of lateral thinking had been added to the strategic thinking curriculum. Students learned to approach problems from unexpected angles, to break things in order to understand them. Many of them found this difficult. Their species had spent thousands of years learning to think in straight lines. Learning to think in crooked ones was surprisingly hard. Valros published a paper that caused controversy across academic circles. Its title was The Competitive Advantage of Mortality: How Limited Lifespan Drives Innovation. In it, he argued that species with short lives were forced to take risks and make decisions faster than species with long lives. They could not afford to wait for perfect information. They could not afford to be careful. They had to act. He credited Maya as co-author. "This will damage your reputation," Maya told him when she read the draft. "Perhaps," Rauros replied, "but it will also start an important conversation. Sometimes scientific progress requires someone to say uncomfortable things." "That sounds like something a human would say." "I have been spending too much time with you." Maya smiled. After 3 months, Valros had learned to read that expression. He knew it meant she was pleased that the political ripple spread far beyond the Institute. Representatives from species that had dismissed humanity as primitive and unimportant suddenly wanted to meet with Earth's diplomats. Trade negotiations that had been stalled for years began moving forward. The single courtesy admission slot that Earth had been granted at the Valdres Institute was quietly expanded to 12. One day, Maya was called to the dean's office. She expected a discussion about her academic progress, or perhaps another request to speak at a conference. She had done several of those already. Instead, she found a delegation waiting for her. The dean sat behind his desk, flanked by 3 figures she did not recognize: a Krethkai in formal robes, an Eloi with the markings of a senior diplomat, and a Shivari whose ceremonial shell paint indicated extreme importance. "Please sit down, Miss Chun," the dean said. Maya sat. Her instincts, the same instincts that had kept her ancestors alive through countless dangers, told her that something significant was about to happen. "The Galactic Council has been discussing the Valdres incident," the LOI diplomat said. "Your actions have raised questions about humanity's place in our society." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that do not have easy answers." The diplomat paused. "For 12,000 years, the older species have guided the younger ones. We have protected them, taught them, helped them develop according to established paths. This system has worked well. It has prevented wars and reduced suffering. But now," the Krethkai continued, "we are wondering if we have made mistakes, if we have been too protective, if we have been limiting the potential of younger species by asking them to follow rather than lead." The Shivari made a clicking sound that Maya's translator rendered as, "Your species does not follow. You do not wait for permission. You see a problem and you act, even when action seems foolish, even when action seems fatal." "That is not always a good thing," Maya said carefully. "No, it is not. Your history is filled with terrible mistakes, wars, destruction, suffering that could have been avoided with more patience and wisdom." The Shivari paused. "But your history is also filled with remarkable achievements. You have accomplished things in decades that took our species millennia. You have survived disasters that would have destroyed us." The dean leaned forward. "The council wants to offer humanity a choice. We can continue on the current path: slow integration, careful guidance the standard process for young species. Or we can try something new. What kind of something new? Partnership, the LOI said. Not guidance. Not protection. True partnership. Your species would have a voice in galactic affairs equal to species that have been spacefaring for thousands of years. Maya was silent for a long moment. Why would you offer this? Because we are old, the Krethkai said simply. We have existed for so long that we have forgotten what it means to be young, to be urgent, to be desperate enough to try impossible things. His bioluminescent crest flickered with something like sadness. We watched you walk into that weapon. We watched you make decisions in seconds that would have taken us years to consider. And we realized that perhaps the galaxy needs species like yours. Species that do not know when to give up. There will be resistance, the Shivari added. Many will say that humans are too young, too reckless, too dangerous. They may be right, but we believe the risk is worth taking. Maya thought about her ancestors. She thought about the ice ages they had survived, the predators they had escaped, the disasters they had endured. She thought about all the times in human history when surrender would have been the rational choice, and humans had chosen to fight anyway. I cannot speak for all of humanity, she said, but I can tell you what I believe. My species has always been hungry. Hungry to explore. Hungry to learn. Hungry to grow. You cannot stop that hunger by protecting us. You can only delay it. The dean nodded slowly. And if we give you partnership? If we give you a voice? Maya smiled, that strange human expression that still made other species slightly nervous. Then you will find out what we can really do. On Maya's last night before returning to Earth for break, she stood on the observation deck and watched the dying star burn. It was peaceful now. The ancient weapon had sunk back into its depths, dormant once more. Professor Oris 7 joined her. The old Talvari moved more slowly now. The radiation had taken a toll on his aging body. But his eyes were bright with something that looked like satisfaction. When you first arrived, he said, I thought the Institute was doing humanity a favor by admitting you. And now? Oris 7 was quiet for a moment, watching the star. Now I think your species has been doing the galaxy a favor by waiting this long to show us what you are. Maya laughed. It was a warm sound, full of genuine amusement. We were not waiting. We were learning. Learning what? How to belong here. How to fit in. How to be part of something bigger than ourselves. She turned to face him. But also learning that we do not need to change who we are. Our impatience, our stubbornness, our refusal to accept impossible odds, those are not weaknesses. They are gifts. R7 considered this. You know, when I was assigned to mentor you, I expected to watch you fail. I thought I would write a report explaining why humans were not ready for the Institute. Instead, I will write a report explaining why the Institute was not ready for humans. Is that a good thing? I do not know yet, but I suspect it is. A new semester was beginning. New students were arriving at the Valdris Institute from across the galaxy. Maya watched them disembark from shuttles and filter into the grand entrance hall. Krethkai and Eloi and Shivari and dozens of other species dot, and among them, walking together in a small group, were 3 humans. They were still small compared to most species. They still had soft skin and short lives and limited cognitive architecture. They still lacked the inherited memories and parallel processing and hive minds of their classmates, but they walked with their heads high. They looked around at the crystal towers and the ancient halls and the students from 1,000 worlds. And they did not seem afraid. They seemed excited. An older student, a Quador, young Krethkai with a bright crest, approached them. You must be the new human students. Welcome to the Institute. I am Velros, one of the humans, a young man with dark hair and nervous energy, looked up at the towering alien. "Is it true what they say? That a human saved this station?" Valrose glanced across the hall to where Maya Chun stood watching the new arrivals. She gave him a small nod. "Yes," Valrose said. "It is true. She was told that humans did not belong here. She was told that she would fail. She was told that her species was too young and too limited to compete with species that have been thinking and learning for thousands of years. What happened?" Valrose made an expression that he had learned from Maya's smile. It looked strange on his alien face, but the meaning was clear. She proved them wrong. The new human students looked at each other. Something passed between them, a shared understanding that went back millions of years. Through ice ages and plagues and disasters. Through every impossible challenge their ancestors had faced and overcome. They were far from home. They were surrounded by beings more powerful and more ancient than they could imagine. The path ahead was uncertain and dangerous and filled with obstacles that would test them in ways they could not predict. But they were human. And humans did not know how to give up.